All right, welcome back. I just finished up turn 3 of John Hill's 1980 Battle for Stalingrad. I'll try and remember some of the details. I did some of it last night, some of it today, so hopefully I don't miss anything too important. I got some new glass, as the cool photography kids like to say, so I'm hoping it makes the corners a little more in focus, maybe the picture overall a little brighter. It's a faster lens compared to the one that I started with. And this is a wide angle lens, so it's going to create some distortion probably in the corners, but I'm hoping the clarity in the corners is worth it. I don't think it's going to be crazy distorted. I mean, you're looking at it right now, so hopefully it's not impossible to look at. But anyway, so I just thought I would give this a shot to see if it gives me a little bit better picture quality. I was also having some trouble with plosives in the last video, so I tweaked my audio gear setup a little bit. So hopefully that isn't a problem anymore. So turn 3. It was an interesting turn. In turn 3, the 29th Motorized Division gets pulled off the map for the Germans. So what that means is, let me see if I can pull it out real quick. Okay, so I think I said at one point in a previous video that while some of the markers, especially the German markers, note which group they are a part of, it doesn't technically matter. So when you get to the third turn, you have to pull off the 29th Motor Division. And instead of, picking through all the pieces looking for ones marked 29th Motor Division, what you do is you pull out your setup charts, and I'll show them right here. 29th Motor Division's right here. And as long as you pull off that equivalent, you're good to go. So what that ended up doing is making the map look bleak for the German forces in turn 3. You can sort of see here the end. It looks bare if you're playing the German side. The Germans managed to, I think we captured these 2 victory hexes there. They managed to hold on to them. The other thing they did was they made a push down the center here. You can see they managed to capture my tweezer work. Anyway, I'm not going to fumble this for the next 45 minutes, but they basically managed to capture that victory hex. They managed to get a unit there, which I think, if my reading of the rules is right, cuts off that resupply hex. I don't think that counts as taking that as a victory hex, but it stops the Soviets from being able to reinforce there because it's adjacent. That, I learned, is a big deal. I mean, it's obviously a big deal, but seeing it in play makes me realize I might have been focusing my pushes in the wrong direction. Watching what happens when they can't reinforce an area, because you only have 3 reinforcement, ferries here, here, and here. You cut one off, and all of a sudden, like, the fact that I didn't have a number of German reinforcements coming in this turn didn't seem as big of a deal, because the Soviets couldn't place where I would have liked to have placed as the Soviets in response. So, and also it happened to be, well, I did upgrade this with the 6 pontoon. So, but it did cut off like an 18 source supply hex. So that did help with the Germans. So they took that victory hex. There was some back and forth here on the Mamayev Kurgan hill. Germans, they held on to it in the beginning. The Soviets immediately took it back during their first reaction, but the Germans then recaptured it basically right off the bat on their second impulse. So it ended up not really benefiting the Soviets. They never really got to pull 2 chits again, and then the Germans managed to hold it for the rest of the turn. There was some, you can see some stuff going on here, some consolidation of the Soviet forces. The Germans, are sort of barely hanging on to the victory hexes there. And there's not a lot here at the moment to help them out. So it's a fortified structure, which means that even the Germans get some bonus. Like you cut bombardment and air power points in half. You get a +2, for their German defense. So they're getting something, even though they're not getting the full benefits that the Soviets would get. But I might need to bring in some of my reinforcements to that southwestern corner to try and help shore that up. But what I was getting at, that I might have lost the thread on, I was taking, initially I went for victory hexes, right? I took that, I grabbed that. And I'm starting to realize that a potential smarter play, maybe it wouldn't be in practice, but in theory, as I look at it, potential smarter play might be to just go hard for these reinforcement hexes. For a couple of different reasons. One is obviously you're cutting off, like even if you just left this one down here up and running, if you're somehow able to really push for these two, you could, the Soviets would be forced to sort of funnel in through this one place, slog through, if they take a straight line, slog through terrain that is not movement friendly. It's 2 movement points for each of these green heavy structures. It's 4 if you have to cut through a fortified structure. I don't know. It seems like it could really hinder, like the Soviet, as it should, I guess. If you take all 3, there's rules about the Soviets collapsing. Maybe it even starts to win you the game. I don't know. So I could imagine, I imagine taking all 3 is a difficult proposition, but just cutting this one off, really made a difference. Oops, I got an upside down shit here. Anyway, maybe I have that wrong, or maybe, in practice it wouldn't make much sense. But, as I was watching it play out a little bit, I started to wonder, maybe I should have really been going after this instead of spending so much effort trying to take those 2 victory hexes. You take the victory hexes later, after you've sort of thinned out the Soviets' reinforcements by cutting off the supply of where the troops can come in. I'm trying to think what else. You can see the dead pile for the Germans. Pretty brutal. These units over here, they're not coming back at all. Soviets, also took a number of casualties, but they've been sort of hunkered down in heavy structures, so it wasn't quite as brutal for them. The Germans, especially in some of these hexes here, this is a heavy structure. So taking that took dive bomber points, tons of artillery, a number of troop casualties just to see, if I could break in. Same here. If you look here, took this victory hex, half of the Red October factory. Whoops. That was not easy. As you can see, another fortified hex. Fortified hexes, you quarter artillery bombardment. You're adding 3 to the defense roll. The Soviets triple their firepower. So even a couple of militias suddenly turn into like a 9 strength attack or something like that. But, I did manage to do it. I managed to barely hold on. I think that's another place I'm going to have to reinforce pretty soon. As you can see, the Soviets are starting to come in. I think I almost had a bit of a supply issue for the Germans here. I think that's sort of their one way out. I'm trying to think, for zone of control, militia units don't extend zone of control. That's why that unit's allowed to be a way out for the German supply trace. Because I think they do exert zones of control, these units, into there. So you can't really go this way. You have to go... They wouldn't exert it into here, but you'd have to... Yeah, I think this was really the only hex for them to get out. Well, no, I guess you can't exert zones of controls into these hexes, so I guess you could sort of loop out that way. Maybe it wasn't so dire. But again, overall, still enjoying it. Starting to... At first, I have to confess, it's because it's been a week or so since I last played, and there's a little bit of a slog to it. I think there's something about this particular rule book, this style. It's not... I don't know what I want, so this is going to be one of those like tedious, useless complaints. I don't know what I want, but I know this isn't quite it. I wish maybe it followed the sequence of play more. Maybe I wouldn't if I saw that alternative, but sometimes I'm just like, wait, where is that? Again, it's for some reason like, the tanks. Looking under the worker unit to find out how many tanks you bring in as replacements instead of in the Soviet replacements. And I know it's sort of cross-references, but I don't understand why it couldn't just be in the replacement section, Anyway, I did find, I can pull it out. There's actually a second book that comes with the Battle for Stalingrad, at least the Excalibur game. And let me pull it out. And I thought it was kind of interesting. It has like an expanded sequence of play. It has like a game setup, detailed sequence. Sort of gives a little bit of a detailed walk through the game. And I'm curious, like, once you get pretty familiar with the rules, if this is actually enough, if there's enough prompting to make the actual rule book not quite so necessary to thumb through every single time. But then I noticed that there were little weird things that, make me a little curious. So, like, if you look at trying to find, say, a German overrun, it says both fire half round up, except Soviet armor flak is doubled, Soviet anti-tank is tripled. So it's sort of summarizing, the basics of a German overrun. Soviets destroy German stack must enter hex, so blah, blah, blah. It never mentions, though, that it has to be in a clear hex terrain. The rulebook does. And so it's one of those things where I don't think it would have added much to have included it in this description, but it makes that description not complete enough to go without knowledge not presented that's from the rulebook. So it's a small thing, but what it made me start to wonder is, if that little detail is not there, what other little details are not there, say, throughout other steps in the process. So I ended up sort of going with it, then realizing, wait a minute, there might be some things omitted that are integral to the process they're sort of summarizing. And then I just sort of stepped back and went back to the regular rulebook. But, maybe if you know the game well enough, you'll say like, oh, right. Yeah, but you can't. And maybe it's obvious. Maybe something about the idea of an overrun should just automatically imply clear hex terrain. It probably should. But it also isn't expressly written. And so as a rule summary, it threw me a little bit because it is lacking a specific detail that I feel like is obviously integral to what's going on. So looking forward to turn 4, I feel like this is one of the lower points for the Germans. They had no reinforcements. They, in a way, it felt like they barely hung on. They did have some reinforcements, obviously, from the Deadpool coming back. And that is actually what allowed them to make this push here. These roads helped them get down. And, you had some units here already. And so some of the units here probably went there. Some of the units there came down and helped, secure the hilltop to prevent the double Soviet reaction ship pull. I went heavy over here and ended up sort of consolidating down here. I'm still using German bombers to pick off Transvolga artillery. Another interesting thing about the rules, and when I say interesting, I mean something that threw me. I think it says in the rulebook that the Transvolga artillery is treated as if it's in like fortified structures or some kind of heavy structure for German bombardment, like artillery bombardment. But I don't know if that included like level bombers, dive bombers, that kind of stuff. Maybe I just overlooked something, but it felt like it specified specifically for artillery, but it didn't specify for air. So I had been just treating the air as if like they're on open terrain, which makes them easy picking, but maybe they shouldn't be considered that. Maybe, the German bombers should be having a tough time picking them off as well, not just the German artillery. So that's something I'm going to double check again before turn 4 starts. Turn 4 is obviously getting to the halfway point of the game. I feel like the Germans, as bleak as it looked for the German side at the beginning of turn 3, turn 4, I'm starting to see like, okay, I could see how they might have a shot at winning. Like I said, they took a victory hex here. They took a victory hex here. This victory hex here also shuts down medium tank production. So again, is one of those things like if you can sort of cut the Soviets off at the source, how much easier does this get for the Germans? The Germans are going to get their reinforcements regardless. The Soviets, they can get like militia and things like that. But you start taking these hexes, they're still going to have their reinforcement table, but, where they come in, you start really being able to control the map a lot better, I think. If I can take this tractor factory. Oh, that's another thing. The Soviet ammo supply, which you see right here, I ended up moving that down. It's getting a little too close to this stuff. And at the end of, I don't know which turn it is, maybe the final reaction, one of the reaction, I think you can just pick it up and move it to somewhere else. So I did that to get it a little bit safer distance away from encroaching German forces. Because again, if you lose that, Soviet artillery fires at half strength for a turn. And then at the end of the final reaction phase, you can put it back on the board. Transvolga artillery are not affected by that, but any artillery, up close and personal in the fight, they would be cut in half. But yeah, so looking forward to turn 4. The Germans have, a decent amount of reinforcements. I feel like I'm going to need some to try and hold my gains there. Uh, I feel like I'm going to need some to try and hold my gains there. So this might not be the turn where I'm really able to push. Like I can't see how I'd even get close to that one. That one seems like that's there and there. The light tank production factory. Those feel like they'd be a tough nut to crack unless you, I guess, just went all in on early turn reinforcements from the north here. But so I feel like that's what's going to be happening in turn 4. Turn 5 for the Germans is a pretty big push for pieces. So we'll see who comes in for turn 4 from the dead pile to supplement the reinforcement chart and see if that's enough to sort of hold here. In a dream world, maybe get a little closer towards that supply hex to force the Soviets only to come in from the northeastern part of the map. So we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping, right now it's the weekend. I'm hoping I'll be able to get another turn or two in over the weekend and then, and get these up in the next couple of days. Let me just see if there's anything I quickly forgot. The oil, is still not burning. I'm not sure what else I might have forgot, but I'm sure plenty. But that's a basic recap of how things are going. And yeah, we'll come back and see what it looks like at the end of turn 4.